Britain is a deeply divided nation. These divisions take many forms: class, income, gender, race, all of which have been the subject of much scrutiny in recent years. But the divide is not just an economic or social one. It also takes the form of a widening geographical divide. Today, in our annual State of the Nation report, the Social Mobility Commission focuses on this neglected place-based divide. The report shows just how far England still is from being a country where aptitude and ability, not background and birth, dictates a child's outcomes in life. Currently, the chances of someone from a disadvantaged background getting on in life are closely linked to where they grow up and where they live. These conclusions are drawn from our Social Mobility Index, which measures the prospects of children from disadvantaged backgrounds doing well as an adult in each of England's 324 local authority areas. The index identifies which parts of the country have the best social mobility outcomes, the hotspots, and which have the worst, the cold spots. The worst area for social mobility in the country turns out to be West Somerset, where the average wage is £312 a week, less than half the £670 weekly average in the London borough of Wandsworth. The Midlands is ranked the worst region for social progress for those from disadvantaged backgrounds. In all, the index is made up of 16 key performance indicators spanning each major life stage. We examine what happens in the early years, when significant gaps open up between children from disadvantaged backgrounds and their more fortunate peers. We track how this is translated into differences in educational attainment in the school years, and then into different outcomes as young people prepare for the labor market. Finally, we look at the very different opportunities people have in their working lives in terms of the availability of top jobs, the prevalence of low pay, and the likelihood of getting a foot on the housing ladder. In recent decades, it has been commonplace to think of England's geographical divide in terms of a north-south divide, but the index paints a more complex picture of the country's left-behind regions. England has a stark social mobility postcode lottery, dominated by four key trends. The biggest divide is between London and the commuter belt areas around it, and the rest of the country. The capital's formidable global economic strength and excellent state schools make it the index's biggest winner. It accounts for nearly 2/3 of all social mobility hotspots. England's best-performing areas for social mobility are Westminster, Kensington and Chelsea, Tower Hamlets, Wandsworth and Hackney. Note: while London contains no cold spots, it does have entrenched pockets of deprivation which are among the worst in the country. High housing costs, when combined with high levels of low-paid employment, are major impediments to achieving even higher levels of social mobility. England's lack of social mobility is a problem that is neither inevitable nor unsolvable. The worst-performing areas for social mobility are no longer the inner cities. Over recent decades, our cities, in both the north and south, have grown and regenerated. But they are not yet the engines of social mobility they have the potential to be. Housing costs are often high, deprivation is commonplace, and low-paid work can be the norm for city residents. The new social mobility cold spots are concentrated in remote rural or coastal areas and in former industrial areas, especially in the Midlands. These areas have fewer specialist teachers, fewer good schools, fewer good jobs, and worse transport links. The bottom 5 cold spots are West Somerset, Newark and Sherwood, Weymouth and Portland, Corby, and Carlisle. Older industrial towns with a mining or manufacturing legacy, such as Barnsley and Mansfield, also do very badly. Many of these areas have suffered from a lack of regeneration. Few high-paying industries are located there, and they often exhibit relatively limited job opportunities and clusters of low pay. Another striking conclusion is that there is no simple correlation between the affluence of an area and its level of social mobility. While affluent areas tend to outperform deprived areas, some of the most deprived areas in England are hot spots, including most of the London boroughs at the top of the index. Conversely, some affluent areas such as Cotswold and West Berkshire are among the worst for providing good education and employment opportunities for poorer youngsters. In these areas, growing wealth and growing poverty sit side by side in ways that not only feel uncomfortable, but are frankly unsustainable. Boarded-up houses in Mansfield. Older industrial towns are social mobility cold spots. Photograph David Silito for The Guardian. A polarized country equals polarized politics. England's lack of social mobility is a problem that is neither inevitable nor unsolvable. Today's report highlights many examples of areas that are bucking the overall trends through the adoption of innovative approaches and best practices. Yet all too often, the debate about social mobility becomes polarized between those who succumb to a weary sense of powerlessness to challenge the global forces that are reshaping the social landscape, and those who subscribe to the theory that change can only happen if the whole global economic system is turned upside down. Both positions are counsels of despair. There is enough evidence from around the world, in our own history and contemporaneously, in local areas to note that, with the right approach, the transmission of disadvantage from one generation to the next can be broken. There is, however, a mind-blowing inconsistency of practice. All too often, schemes start up and then wither away. Initiatives lack scale, experience is not pooled, evidence is not embedded properly, or ignored. That needs to change, as does the decades-long assumption that Britain can get by with unbalanced economic growth. While the government is understandably heavily focused on Brexit, this appears to leave little headspace to tackle the phenomenon of left-behind Britain, areas that are trailing economically and being hollowed out socially, as, for example, a lack of professional job opportunities for locally born graduates causes a brain drain to our major cities. Reversing this will take time, effort and resources, but a start can be made by government setting out a new objective, over a 10-year period, to target an increasing proportion of public resources into those parts of the country that have been most left behind. This focus should be on local cold spots rather than entire economic regions, since the social mobility lottery varies widely between very specific areas of the country. Simply tinkering with change will not do the trick. The growing sense that we have become an us-and-them society is deeply corrosive. Of the 65 cold spot areas identified in this report, all but 5 voted leave in last year's EU referendum. Our politics are becoming polarized, just as our country is. The analysis in this report explains why there is such a sense of political alienation and social resentment in so many parts of the country. Whole tracts of the population feel left behind, because they are. Whole communities feel the benefits of globalization have passed them by, because they have. Whole sections of society feel they are not getting a fair chance to succeed, because they are not. It cannot go on like this. If we want a genuinely united kingdom, a new approach is needed. Alan Milburn is chair of the Social Mobility Commission. If you have experiences relating to this article that you'd like to share, please email us at inequality.project@theguardian.com.